Let's talk about Moneyball for a minute because we wanted to touch on this and you brought it up. When you were,
are you gonna lay into me?
No.
Are you gonna say you're full of shit?
I'm curious where this is going. We didn't talk about this before.
Let's talk about Moneyball. There's really those pictures.
Oh my gosh! I'm quick story because you brought this up. So I'm very clear about this. I'm not an anti-analytics person. Okay, I'm very. So I got to tell the story. So at some point, so it was probably like mid-May to early June. I got a high school teammate, an AAU teammate that I grew up with, who's a coach, and he asked me to do this Zoom call with about 90 college coaches. And on the Zoom call was me and two other NBA guys, NBA players. And we're on the call for about an hour and a half. And my wife's kind of tugging at me by like the beginning of hour two. She's tugging at me like, hey, come to bed. It's 10:30 at night, whatever. So I'm like, all right, I'm looking for a point where I can sort of break away from the call. So a coach gets on and he's like, asked about analytics, and he asked about the importance of it and how we can apply it to college basketball. And the first two guys on the call go on this just incredible rant about just the dangers of analytics and how the eye test is really all that matters. And I look at my wife and I'm like, okay, now's the time. Like it's coming. So I was like, they go first, and then I'm like, oh guys, I'm sorry, it's 10:30, I gotta go, because I didn't want to like make these guys, look bad or anything. But I am, to be clear, I think there's so much value in data, and there's so much value in analytics, and to the point I was going to make is just how much that has evolved specifically in basketball. The first time I heard points per possession was my very first day with Stan Van Gundy. And this was 2007 or 2008. I guess it was 2007 was his first year. And we're in training camp. And he starts talking about the type of shots we want. And I was like, what? And he goes through and he's like, a corner three is worth this many points per possession. A free throw is worth this. A layup is worth this. You see these areas right here? They're not worth shit, the mid-range. So these are the shots we want, and then we're gonna make our offense so that we get these shots. And I was like, whoa, I'd never heard it. This is 2007. I'd never heard that before. My question about Moneyball was basically the impact that it had across sports. So you're writing this in a very micro way about the Oakland Athletics and Billy Beane. As you're writing this book, did you get the sense that this was going to have such an impact on sports as a whole?
The first thing I thought it was going to do was cause people to question how people got value, because I thought that was the interesting story. I thought, what an incredible thing that this sport, it basically hasn't changed in 100 years. Baseball has got data attached to every move that the player makes, right? It's not like they weren't stats for baseball players. And it's got, a million eyes on every game. That this has got dramatically misvalued players because people aren't accessing the really important information about the players. And I thought what people would take away from that is, well, if it can happen in baseball, it can happen anywhere. Like every corporation must have people in it who are misvalued in this, because, if you can't value a baseball player properly, how can you value like some corporate employee properly? So I was thinking that. I wasn't thinking about how it was going to spill over into other sports, but it happened instantly. Within a year of the book coming out, I had calls from owners and GMs from football and basketball, and then weird stuff like Indian cricket and Australian rugby, and like there wasn't a thing that I didn't get a call. And normally what I do is I just send them on to Billy Beane to talk to them about what they were doing. I didn't have anything to add. I said, I wrote what I knew in the book. But the basketball connection became meaningful to me because the then owner of the Houston Rockets read the book. And he said, I want to do that. This makes total sense to me. And he hired Daryl Morey to be the GM, who became the kind of advance man for the whole movement. And Daryl actually was really mostly people. It's funny, the whole nerd movement in sports, there are two kinds of nerds. They're nerds who really wish they were jocks. And so when they collide with jock culture, they start to lift weights, and they start to kind of look like they maybe played something in high school. And there's that nerd, and they don't want anything to do. They don't want anybody to know that what they are in their hearts are nerds, and so they don't want to acknowledge like Moneyball had anything to do with what they do. Then they're nerds who just know they're nerds. And Daryl's a nerd who knows he's a nerd, even though he's kind of a big guy. And Daryl called and said, you're the reason I got my job, and I just want to thank you. And I said, you can thank me by letting me into your organization. Let me write about what you're doing. And he let me write like this wonderful story about Shane Battier.
You wrote the story, I think, in 2009.
Yeah,
I read it then.
Magazine,
I read it again like 5 years ago. It's a great story. It's a great story.
It was a wonderful. I don't want to take credit for it because it was just like handed to me on a platter. It was just, this is a wonderful story about a guy whose value is not perceived. And how far ahead of you was he at Duke? Did you overlap it?
He graduated in 2001, and I started in 2003.
Okay, so
but I know. I know Shane. Yeah, I know Shane.
Yeah, how could you not, right?
JJ, I had a question for you about Shane. When Michael's story came out, was this a thing that was acknowledged amongst players?
No. We were still in the hero ball era. The player mindset back then was still hero ball. There was no firm understanding of the value of certain shots or the value of certain defensive coverages. And players were not like, you have to understand too, 2009, most organizations didn't really have an analytics department then.
Right.
I mean, I can remember when I first got to LA, there wasn't really a front office. This was 2013. There wasn't really a front office in place. Sterling had hired some people, but there wasn't an analytics department in 2013 with the Clippers when I started there.
It's funny because in a funny way, I think it's because analytics is basically insulting to everybody who has experience. Because what it's saying is, the movement is about the creation of knowledge. It's about trying to find new knowledge on a basketball court or on a baseball field, and then you exploit the knowledge. But what does that say? If you're creating new knowledge, it means that the people who are playing and coaching and managing now don't know everything there is to know. That there's ignorance, and it's very hard. It's got to be, if you're playing at your level, it's got to be very hard to believe there's nothing you don't know about the game. It's got to be a little insulting. Like, what do you mean I don't know where the value shot is on the court? I've been doing this, and I'm the best at doing it in the world. So I think that the resistance is that you got to kind of start from a position of a little bit of humility and say, we could find out stuff we don't know. And we could discover that the efficient thing is to take 63-point shots a game. It's played into your career in interesting ways, I bet, right? Because in a funny way, the shots you were taking at Duke were probably not that different from the shots that Daryl Morey would want you to take.
Right.
Right. And so for you, it's been a tailwind.
For sure. I mean, the value of shooting and the value of a guy who can not just shooting, but for me, I am a high volume, high efficiency shooter.
Right.
So there's maybe 5 to 10 guys in the world that can sort of do what I do. You know what I mean?
Right.
They can take let's call it 6+ threes a game and shoot over 40%. There's not many guys that can do that.
Yes. I know you're good.
No.
We get to this. Every podcast, Michael. At some point, this comes out. This took a little. Took a little longer than usual.
Every one of my books has been on the New York Times bestseller list.
Michael, I know you're good.
Michael's had 12 books turned into blockbuster movies. So we're just gonna. This portion now.
But the point. There's a bigger point here, in that there are people whose games actually were being exposed as being not as valuable as everybody thought. And those people are going to be really resistant to this new knowledge. There are coaches who are coaching in a certain way and who are going to be exposed as maybe not coaching as well as they. So it creates enormous friction. And I can see why there's a kind of controversy, because people's interests are threatened. For me, it's been, this is now, I wrote that book, that book is 17 years old. It's still sort of alive in the culture because the conversation's still being had. because the change is still occurring and the arguments are still happening. I mean, Charles Barkley still thinks Daryl Morey's an idiot. There's he's really funny about it, but he still thinks Daryl Morey's an idiot. So it's you look at how long it takes for that kind of change, and I think it is progress, even though in some cases, like, it makes the sport, in baseball, it makes the sport more boring, but never mind that. Change is slow. So it's not surprising the change in the culture is slow. When you're changing, you're necessarily threatening some people's interests, and those people are going to resist. And you see it in politics just like you see it in sports.
Knowledge is all. Tommy, I just want to point one thing out. So you said the knowledge is always sort of evolving, right? How we interpret data, because the game's always evolving, and we as players, we have to be able to adapt to that evolution. And I've seen it in my career where the guys who refuse to adapt are no longer in the NBA. And I'm lucky that my base skill set already was to be a good 3-point shooter, so I haven't had to necessarily adapt a ton. But I will give you one example. So, I had like a 6-year stretch where I was one of the 5 best mid-range shooters in the NBA, where I'm shooting, I think it was somewhere around 50% or 51%. And my first year in Philly, my 3-point attempt rate was basically what it was in LA, what it was my last couple years in Orlando, and my mid-range shots were, the same in terms of volume. Philly came to me, their analytics guy came to me that offseason, and he just showed me some stuff. He said, look, you're a great mid-range shooter, but let's just say you shot all those mid-range shots from 3. And he used the example in the playoffs of like Boston running me off the line. So they ran me off the line. And now I'm shooting a 1-dribble pull-up from 17, 18 feet. Here's the value of that shot. Here's the value of the shot if you shoot a sidestep 3 instead of shooting the pull-up jumper. And I have to be honest with you, I adapted because my 3-point attempt rate my last year in Philly and this year in New Orleans was the highest it's been in my career. And so now when I shot fake, I think shoot a 3. When I come off a DHO or a pin down, I'm not thinking curl to the elbow. I'm thinking get all the way to the 3-point line. But it did mess with me a ton. It messed with me a ton. And even to the point where now I'll be in a game and look, sometimes the shot is the mid-range shot. And I'll be going up in my motion, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, I know our assistant coach in New Orleans was Chris Finch, and he'd just kill us whenever we shot a mid-range shot in film. And I'm like, this is going to be on film tomorrow as a bad shot. I know it, and it's tough. And I think that's why there's some pushback as players, because it's tough to be out there on the court and be worried about, is this a bad shot or is this a good shot? Sometimes it is the shot on that possession that works.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It makes total sense. And one of the things I remember about doing the piece with Shane Battier that was so cool was that he had actually taken the data and applied it on the court. That he was doing what you did, but he had done it to his opponents. So he figured out when he's guarding Kobe where he wants Kobe to take the shot from, and where he wants to guide him because he's just slightly less efficient there. I remember I interviewed Kobe Bryant. I went into the locker room. I said, what do you think of all this? He was like, it's all bullshit. He can't guard me. What are you talking about?
There's always going to be some ego involved in the NBA. I mean, you've witnessed that in the last 12 minutes with me. So